This is by Lusna Pradhan. Details about Ma Saraswati River. So, the Saraswati River has been an object of great controversy for more than a century. Uh, the first Western records of this river were date back to the 19th century, I believe, or even before that, when British archaeologists and explorers found evidence of a dry riverbed in Western India, and they interviewed many local people and who all told them this ancient story that there was once a great river over here which was named the Saraswati, and it has dried out a long time ago, but we still believe that it is flowing underground or something like that. So these records have been there. They date back to the 19th century at least, and these are European records. And there is clear evidence of a great dry riverbed. If you look at Google Earth, so if you know where to look, you will find that there is a great dry riverbed which is enormous. It's an enormous ancient river which has dried up. And so this has been an object of great controversy. Western historians and even Indian historians have been denying this for almost a century. They have been denying the existence of such a river. They have been calling it a myth. But unfortunately for them, now the scientific evidence is too much to ignore. There is incontrovertible evidence of the presence of a great ancient river in Western India. It flowed from the Himalayas all the way to the so-called Arabian Sea. It flowed into the Arabian Sea in the region of present-day Kutch. So this is a very great river. It was greater than all of the other rivers in the Sapta Sindhu region. It was definitely bigger and wider than the Indus River. And therefore, this ancient phase of our civilization, that is called the Harappan phase of India's civilization, should actually be called the Saraswati phase of India's civilization, because this dry riverbed is exactly where our itihas says it would be. So it is clearly none other than the great ancient Saraswati River, and it has been determined to have dried out about 1500 BCE or thereabouts. And what we find is that there are thousands of unexplored archaeological sites on the banks of this dry riverbed. And there are more ancient archaeological sites on the banks of the Saraswati than on the banks of the Indus. So clearly this was a more significant river than the ancient Indus River. And what happened was that this river dried out because of climate change. So what happened was that in ancient times, the Indian monsoon was much more intense. It was much heavier than what it is today. And around 6000 BCE or thereabouts, the Indian monsoon started declining slowly. And the Saraswati River was fed by the monsoons and also by glacial melt from the Himalayas. So because of the decline, the gradual decline of the Indian monsoon, the river started drying up over the centuries and the millennia, and it stopped reaching the sea about 1500 years BCE. And even today, some portion of it is still extant in the northern part of India. It's called the Ghaggar Hakra River. It is a seasonal river. It is dry for some months, and it flows with some water for some months in the year. So there is no doubt about the evidence of this river, and the fact that this river existed it gives us a very good handle on the date of the Rig Veda, because according to mainstream history, so-called mainstream history, the Rig Veda was written around 1200 BCE. Now the fact is that the Rig Veda extensively mentions the Saraswati River, and it mentions a great river. It calls it the mother of floods. It calls the Saraswati a loudly roaring river, and a river that was prone to flooding very often. It was clearly a great river. It was clearly a much greater river than the Indus. And that is what the Rig Veda has recorded. So clearly, the Rig Veda was written at a time when the river Saraswati was in its prime, and not when it was drying out or after it dried out. So that would place the Rig Veda to around 6000 BCE, 8000 years before today, and not at 1200 BCE, like our so-called eminent historians would like us to believe. So things are changing. Scientific evidence is dismantling and debunking the colonial narratives of history that we have been learning and we are still learning today. So it's great. So the Saraswati River did exist, and it is now being written about, and it is being papers, scientific research papers are being published about it in very prestigious journals like Nature. So it's now become mainstream. It is now accepted that it existed, and it's extremely inconvenient for colonial theories like the Aryan invasion theory and so forth.